very informal. I'm going to lead you through 1 Corinthians. It's kind of what we're talking about, but during it, there are some pictures. I know a lot of you have been asking for pictures from some of our Greece trip. So there'll be some playing up on the screen also as we go along, and you can see what those are. So first of all, I just want to talk about 1 Corinthians and Paul's ministry there, and you can see some of the pictures of Corinth as we go through the slideshow for you. Paul first came to Corinth after he visited Athens. Corinth was a wealthy commercial center where people could go to get rich. Paul was there. He worked with Jewish tent makers, Priscilla and Aquila, and Corinth had been defeated by the Romans. So Corinth is being rebuilt. It'd been defeated by the Romans, and when Paul visited, it had only been a city again for about 100 years. So it's a newly established environment. And that makes for some interesting things that go on here. As my professor called it, when we were visiting there, he referred to it as the Wild West. So you have this mix of cultures that are colliding there, and this attitude of kind of one-upsmanship that is going on. So Corinth was an interesting place at the time. There was no leadership there, so people could move up in social class pretty fast. And there was a significant social and economic competition that would go on because people were trying to get wealthy very quick. This was a community where humility was anti-cultural, and the people were trying to get ahead at whatever means they could. So as you see, there'll be some pictures there of the ruins as you flip through to kind of get an idea of. I didn't realize when we were there how big Corinth actually was. I think, I don't have it written down, but I think it was about 400,000 people. So that's a lot, yes.
I assume that's the ruins.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Were you able to walk down them?
We were able to walk some of it. We were on a limited time on part of it, but we were able to walk the path that goes by these different workshops and the springs. The next one, I believe, will display the springs at Corinth.
So is that a picture that you've taken?
Yeah, correct. Yes. So we're right there in it.
How did you get that without any people?
Well, we were there during the day, and I was kind of, to be honest, I was lagging behind. I'll be honest. I was the bad student that was waiting way behind to try to get pictures without people in them. So yeah, it's an amazing sight. Like, if you ever get the chance to go, it is an amazing sight to see. You're still seeing the ruins. It's not all reconstructed, but enough of it is there for you to be able to see, where speaking went on, where kind of the marketplace activities were going on. If Paul was working in a workshop, as we would think as a tent maker, then where that was going on. So it's really an amazing sight to behold if you ever get the chance to go. So I thought the most beautiful was the springs, because the springs you could actually still hear the water running. So I waited behind for all the people so I could hear the water actually running. Very peaceful. So any other questions on relationship with that? Okay. So what was amazing to me after, this is a little bit off of 1 Corinthians, but what was amazing to me after being in Athens and going on this journey was how radical Paul's message must have been. Everywhere you went in Athens, it seemed like there were statues or mosaics or whatever of different Greek gods. So you think about all your history that you've learned of Greek gods, and if you remember any of that, that was really, really prominent in the time that Paul was doing his ministry. And so this belief in one God that Paul was coming in to introduce was totally different thinking for them. Totally different thinking. And not only did they worship other gods, they also worshipped any ruling emperors that were there. So that some of them also took on a god status of their own too. So Paul's message would have been really, really radical. So you think about that, how because he's going in and saying all of what you're doing there, you need to stop. You need to stop worshiping all these other idols. There's one true God. And so I showed some pictures of some of the statues. Like there's lots of museums, lots of different. This is the spring at Corinth that I was referring to. So you can see how beautiful that is, just as it stands today. So you imagine. That was the other part that kind of got me is the architecture. Architecture is absolutely amazing. How they built everything and how it is still today, some of those things standing, is pretty incredible. And they didn't have the equipment that we have.
Did they come there to bathe?
There's actually bathrooms and stuff too, so that was surprising to me. So there's different bathrooms. Like when we went to, I don't remember if Corinth had running water. I think it did. I think Corinth had running water, Ephesus did. So you think, it's amazing to think that they had running water. They actually had running water. So it's a pretty amazing thing. So as we go on the pictures, you'll see here some of everywhere, it's just like nonstop where you went, you would see different statues and different things that would relate to the Roman Empire and the gods. And some of them were used even, the Roman Empire, a lot of them were used as intimidation. So I don't have any of those up here, but they had wars, lots of wars depicted, or when they had conquered somewhere, they were depicted in something. And if you think about the mindset, why would you rally against that when you know what's happened before? You're seeing everywhere you go, you're being reminded of how someone tried to challenge them, and that's what happened. So I want us to think about what today, so worshiping gods and idols seem foreign to us, but what in our lives today can compete with God for our attention? Do you think we have idols and other gods today? Actors and actresses, famous figures? Absolutely. We can definitely lift them up as a God status, right? Other things that compete with? NFL.
On Sundays,
Yep.
Competing for God on Sundays.
I would challenge to say all sports now. I know growing up, I didn't have any sports going on Sundays, and now as a parent, it seems like there's constantly stuff scheduled on Sundays. So yeah, NFL for sure, and electronics. Isn't that interesting to think about? Electronics. We can't even walk, I don't know if you watch the kids today, they can't even put it down and walk into another room. I literally watched my daughter the other day go to the bathroom with her phone. I was like, what are you doing?
But it's not just kids, it's adults.
It's adults too. It is.
I've watched people that are dining together, and they're not even looking at each other, they're both on their phones.
Yep. Absolutely. And you wonder what in the world is so important that they can't connect with each other. Jim?
All materials, possessions, money, cars, houses.
For sure. I was wondering if somebody would say money, because it's one of those things we don't like to talk about, but it's a lot of times, I think our importance is how much time we spend in something shows our priorities. And I can tell you that I get lost in thinking about finances a lot, about money, how I'm going to pay for something, how I'm going to do something. And then I have to question myself, do I think of God that much? Do I pray to God that much? Do I worship God that much? Do I spend that much time sharing God's love? Absolutely. So, we look at all those statues and things, and we may not do it in that way, but we really do. car sitting out front brand new is kind of the same thing. Competing for houses. And you know people that do it way beyond what they can afford. Yeah. Jobs can become a god. Absolutely. Absolutely. Have you had an experience on that you'd like to share, or just in general? Yeah, in general. Yeah, definitely. I think that we've become a society that we find value in our work, and we're looking for that status in our work. For sure. Power and control. We see that a lot. We see that a lot. Especially in our world today, it seems like it's who's right and who's wrong. And I think we lose sight of God's message, and we prefer to find out who's right or wrong. So, okay. So, we're going to talk about 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians is one of the undisputed letters of Paul. So, there's books in the Bible that are attributed to Paul, but have been disputed by theologians as to whether or not he actually wrote them, or just wrote parts of them. So 1 Corinthians is not disputed. It is clearly recognized that it was written by Paul, and he wrote it when he moves on to Ephesus. So he writes it, 1 Corinthians, when he's living in Ephesus. And it's probably no more than 2 or 3 years after Paul left Corinth. So we're talking year 53 to 54. Paul's letters, this is key for all of Paul's letters, and I put this in here because I wanted to make sure you get it. Paul's writings are letters, and they're letters that are specific to a church and a specific situation or problem that is occurring in that church. These, you can't look at Paul's letters and think of them as something that would apply to every church and every situation, because you have to understand what's going on as to how he addresses it. And really he comes in and it's more like a pastoral work. He's dealing with whatever the issue might be, and he's kind of being asked to handle that as the pastor of giving advice, giving what they should do, what they shouldn't do, kind of a thing. Okay, so when Paul was in Ephesus, what went on with 1 Corinthians is Paul was in Ephesus. He was notified of a conflict that was going on in the church in Corinth, and he wrote this letter in part to address that divisiveness that was going on. And it says in 1 Corinthians 1:11, "For it has been reported to me by Chloe's people that there is quarreling among you, my brothers." So the church is dealing with many issues, but one of the main issues is factions. People have divided up as to who to follow. And so Paul has had this reported to him, and so he's addressing these factions, but he's also addressing questions that they had over sexual immorality, questionable practices like around the Lord's Supper and spiritual gifts. There's some lawsuit questions, and we're going to kind of break some of that down, but the initial thing for Paul is the church has become divided. So he's addressing that issue is kind of, I would see it as the top priority. As we move on, the church was also dealing with different socioeconomic backgrounds. And that was another cause of difficulties within the church. So remember I told you about Corinth. It had just been reestablished. It had only been there for about 100 years. So when it wasn't a city and all of a sudden it was opened up, became a city again, it became this melting pot of all different classes and cultures that came in. And so there was this huge attitude of competition that wasn't healthy, and it was causing a big divide. So in 1 Corinthians, Paul is addressing this need for unity and the need for all people to be recognized with value, that all human beings have value. And so it's brought to Paul's attention that there's some spiritual elitism happening. There's competition